Hello everyone, welcome to Inner Spark. Today I want to share with you a story that carries a powerful life lesson, one that will make you reflect on what truly matters in life. Pride may take you high for a while, but it cannot keep you there. What sustains true success is humility, compassion, and genuine connection with others. If we let arrogance rule our hearts, we risk losing everything that truly matters. Before we dive into the story, make sure to like this video, subscribe to Inner Spark, and hit the notification bell so you never miss more inspiring and life-changing stories like this one. Now let's begin. Richard was a man who lived in London, admired by some, but quietly disliked by many. He had built his fortune through clever business deals and bold investments, but his success made him arrogant. He looked down on those who didn't have the same wealth as him, often dismissing them as lazy or unworthy. His friends were few, most of them only sticking around because of the luxury he offered. Richard's words were often sharp, and he believed he didn't need kindness, because power and money were enough to rule his world. He thought he had it all figured out, but in reality, his arrogance was quietly setting the stage for his downfall. At the height of his success, Richard bought a massive mansion outside the city, filled with imported cars, priceless art, and even a private theater. He would throw parties every weekend, inviting celebrities, influencers, and wealthy business associates. The gatherings were lavish, with flowing champagne, expensive food, and endless entertainment. But in those moments of laughter and flashing lights, Richard often felt a quiet emptiness he could not explain. Deep inside, he knew those people weren't really there for him. They were there for what he could offer. Yet his pride silenced that thought, convincing him that envy from others was proof of his greatness. He believed attention equaled love, but he was wrong. One afternoon, Richard fired one of his long-term employees, Thomas, simply because he felt the man was too slow. Thomas had been loyal for nearly 20 years, working late nights and even sacrificing family time to meet deadlines. Yet Richard dismissed him without a second thought, treating him like a replaceable tool. As Thomas left, he looked Richard in the eye and said, "One day, you will understand that arrogance destroys everything, including yourself." Richard laughed, brushing off the words as nothing but bitterness. But deep inside, those words echoed like thunder, leaving a trace of unease in his proud heart. He did not know then that Thomas's warning would soon come true. Not long after, Richard's investments began to collapse. The global economy shifted, and one by one, his businesses faced financial losses. At first, Richard ignored the signs, certain that his brilliance would turn things around. He told himself he had beaten challenges before and would do so again. But arrogance blinded him to reality. He refused advice, rejected offers of help, and doubled down on risky decisions. The mansion that once felt like a kingdom now seemed like a prison as debt grew heavier every day. Still, Richard convinced himself he was untouchable. He did not realize that the empire he built on pride was crumbling beneath him. His so-called friends stopped visiting. The parties ended, the laughter faded, and Richard found himself eating dinner alone at a table meant for 20. The emptiness that once lingered quietly in the background now shouted at him every night. The silence of the house became unbearable, echoing with memories of shallow laughter and fake smiles. He had wealth on paper, but no one to share it with. Pride told him to keep his struggles hidden, but his world was collapsing in silence. He began to see the true cost of arrogance. He had pushed away everyone who could have stood by him in his darkest hour. Soon, the bank repossessed his luxury cars and seized several of his properties. News of his downfall spread quickly, and the same people who once praised him now whispered behind his back. Former colleagues mocked his arrogance, while others simply said it was karma. Richard could not escape the harsh truth. His pride had left him with no allies, no friends, and no respect. He was no longer feared, admired, or envied. For the first time in years, he truly felt powerless. Sitting in his empty mansion, he realized money could not save him from loneliness. With nowhere else to turn, Richard returned to the small town where he grew up. Walking through the streets, he felt the weight of every insult he had ever thrown at others. People looked at him differently, now not with envy, but with pity. The shops, parks, and cafes that once felt beneath him now reminded him of the simple life he had abandoned. For the first time, Richard realized that all his arrogance had built walls between him and the very people who once cared for him. He was no longer a man admired, he was a man humbled. The fall from wealth was painful, but the fall from pride was even harder. In his loneliness, Richard reached out to his estranged sister, Jenny. They hadn't spoken in years because he once dismissed her simple life as pathetic. Jenny worked as a teacher, living modestly but happily, and Richard had mocked her choices. Yet when he called, she welcomed him without hesitation. She reminded him of the days they had nothing but still shared laughter, love, and simple joys. That warmth struck Richard deeply. It was something his millions had never given him. For the first time, he understood the strength of unconditional love. Living with Jenny, Richard began to see life differently. He helped her with chores, cooked meals, and even joined her in volunteering at a local shelter. At first, people were skeptical of his presence, remembering the arrogant man he once was. Some whispered behind his back, doubting his sincerity. But slowly, through genuine effort and humility, Richard began to earn their respect. For the first time, he wasn't respected for his money, but for his humanity. Each small act of kindness built trust, and each day of humility healed the wounds his pride once caused. The shelter introduced Richard to people who had far less than he ever did, yet carried more gratitude and kindness than he ever knew. He listened to their stories, their struggles, and their hopes, realizing how blind he had been. Each conversation chipped away at the pride that had once defined him. He learned that life's true riches come not from wealth, but from compassion and connection. Watching people smile despite hardships made him question everything he once valued. He realized humility was not weakness, it was the foundation of true strength. Over time, Richard began to rebuild not his empire, but his character. He started small businesses, this time focusing not just on profit, but also on helping others grow. He treated employees with respect, paid them fairly, and created opportunities for those who needed them most. The same man who once fired Thomas coldly now made sure no employee ever felt undervalued. His businesses grew slowly, but they grew with purpose and honesty. Richard discovered that serving others brought more satisfaction than chasing status ever had. Richard never regained the same level of wealth he once had, but he found something far greater: peace. He learned to laugh without needing the spotlight, to share without expecting anything in return, and to love without pride standing in the way. He finally understood Thomas's warning: arrogance destroys everything, but humility rebuilds from the ashes. His days were no longer filled with pressure to impress, but with gratitude for the life he now lived. For Richard, peace was worth more than millions. His story spread through the community, not as a tale of wealth, but as a lesson of change. People admired him, not for what he owned, but for the man he became. Richard had fallen from the top, but he rose again in a way that money could never buy. He became a living reminder that no matter how far arrogance takes you, it can never carry you to true happiness. His life became proof that even the proudest heart can change if it chooses. Humility. His legacy was no longer wealth, but wisdom. In conclusion, Richard's journey teaches us that arrogance is a silent poison. It makes us blind to reality, deaf to advice, and numb to kindness. But when life humbles us, it gives us a second chance to rebuild with compassion, to connect with others, and to find peace in simplicity. Success is not measured by the wealth we gain, but by the hearts we touch and the respect we earn. His story reminds us to choose humility before life forces it upon us. So if you ever feel pride creeping in, remember Richard's story, The Fall, of an arrogant millionaire who discovered the priceless value of humility. Thank you for listening to this story from Inner Spark. If you found it inspiring, make sure to like, subscribe, and share it with others who may need this reminder. Your support helps us bring more stories that spark reflection and growth. Stay humble, stay kind, and never forget the true measure of success is found in the way you live, not just in what you own.